Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and it is February 10th, Monday. And the theme of the day is that Mondays are greater than Fridays. We continue to kind of see this around the weekends, the last few weekends. On Friday, it seems like traders are toning down their risk going into the weekend, whether or not it's a long weekend or a regular weekend. And then on Mondays, the market seems to bounce back pretty well. So, of course, everything that we're going through in today's video for information purposes only. Here's our risk disclaimer, not giving out any advice or recommendations. But yeah, it's been pretty interesting the way that these Mondays are working after the weekend, and we essentially came in. The tape was a little bit weak going into the open today, but we bounced back pretty decently. It was one of those situations too. If you heard my video on Friday, I wasn't exactly super bullish, but it's one of those things where what I said on Twitter earlier was that there's so much like you open up Twitter on the weekend, and granted, sorry, I'm just looking to see if there's any news on Slack, which I don't think so. It's still halted, news pending. But it's one of those things where if you open up Twitter on the weekend, now there's some great people on Twitter that are pretty neutral. They just continue to kind of do their work, put out charts, look for bullish setups, bearish setups, whatever. Seem to just be able to put their head down. And those are few and far between. And I always, I try to put out a Friday follow list when I can. But then there's a whole bunch of people who are constantly trying to kind of look to see, every negative headline there is about the coronavirus, regardless of like where the story is coming from and how outlandish it is. People are they're like accepting that as truth. So I don't know what's really going on with that. It seems like anybody could put out a story about this. So, a guy that you'd never heard of, a news source that you've never heard of, and people are buying it. So that's what I mean in terms of I think right now, as usual, whenever there's a big story on the tape, it really what I've learned to do in my trading over the years is, of course, you want to pay attention to like the headlines if they're really going to be moving, but really pay attention to what is going on, underneath the hood in terms of what's going on in the internals, what's going on in price. I'm a firm believer that price is the leading indicator in the market. And I'll tell you why. Because the other thing that people are looking at is like, oh my God, when are these companies going to go back to work in China, right? And how much of an impact is that going to be? The problem is, right, let's be an optimist just for a second. And let's say that they do resume work in a week or two, right? Do you think at that point, once they formally announce it, that that's going to be a good buying opportunity? Or do you think that's already going to be priced into the market? My opinion is that will already be priced into the market. The market knows, the price knows, and it price is based on probabilities too. So by the time, let's see, Slack isn't updating financial guidance. Let's see what the headlines are. IBM has been Slack's largest customer for several years. So the story out was that they're gaining all this business, which I was a little bit worried about. Let me just post this. Sorry to interrupt the video, but I know people want to know about this. So anyway, I'll move on from here. But I think, just remembering how the market works in that fashion, that, often it's the same thing with the trade war, right? When the trade war, when they actually signed it, now, we didn't sell off on that. It wasn't necessarily sell the news, but the market rallied into that announcement pretty decently. And if you're waiting for like the all clear for this coronavirus to be cleared, I don't think that that's the right way to necessarily trade and to take advantage of, a lot of these things that are hitting stories that are on the tape, right, where everybody is pessimistic on, where the news is reporting only the negatives. a lot of times they're buying opportunities. Not every single time, but the majority of them are buying opportunities. So we'll see how this shakes out. I am optimistic regarding this whole thing, but I think right now the way that I'm kind of taking advantage of this is buying a little bit of the pessimism. All right, so let me move on from that, but I think it's just good to address because again, like, you open up Twitter on the weekend and like that's basically what's going on. So today's outperformance. So I came in today like pretty objective. Like, I was actually thinking that we might go a little bit lower, and I was hoping for like a pretty decent red open because I thought it would be a good buying opportunity. We didn't get it, and the tape basically grew stronger throughout the day. Really interesting. The semiconductors kind of came at the end. AMD was strong all day long, and I got long AMD in the tactical portfolio a couple weeks ago. Sorry, that's wrong. I got long AMD last week. So this was a real nice move today. One of the things that I talked about in the weekend video, the member video, was that different semiconductors look. Some were showing weakness coming into today. Some were showing strength. This is what I was looking at over the weekend, and sure enough, AMD and Nvidia are the two stronger ones. TSM is one of those ones that looks a bit weaker right now. So I think the semiconductors, there's something interesting going on there. Maybe they're separating within the group, but they're not all moving together right now. And I think that continues to be one to focus on. Again, SMH very strong. It did end. I believe it opened up lower and ended up 2.2. Yeah, so it did open up lower. So really nice comeback there. Also, tech was very strong throughout the day. A lot of names like the FANG names I thought were pretty strong, or just some internet names. Biotech was pretty much strong all day long. And a couple other groups. Interesting, gold miners for a while were leading the session. Did they actually? No, they didn't. They weren't the best performing. Actually, they were the best performing. GDX and GDXJ were both up the most, but it seemed like there was some momentum, especially in growth names. One of the things that I have been looking at is this growth versus value. So if I bring this up here, so I'm distracted because people are asking questions about this halt and what it means. I think they just wanted to clarify when a stock is up 15%. They may have just wanted to clarify what the story was rather than the rumors that were on the tape. So IWD versus IWF, I would keep an eye on this. Growth is really outperforming value by a lot. In this chart that I've got, value is in the numerator and growth is in the denominator. So you could see what's going on here. We had that one day, I think it was Wednesday last week, where value was really hot, and it was just basically one day. So if we break this apart and look at the relationship over 5 years, now growth has been outperforming. If we just look at the overall trend, growth has been outperforming, but there's been times, especially towards the end of the year, 2008 was one, 2016 was another one. So we're not at that time, but I think value at some point is probably due for a bounce, and maybe growth sells off a little bit because this is getting pretty extended. I think I talked about the RSI. Let's see what the RSI is on this chart. I think I can use this. It's a 25. It was worse last week, but it's pretty darn oversold. Part of that is definitely energy, which is value. XOP was down another 2.5% today. You could see, so that continues to underperform. OIH is there too. That had that bounce on I think it was the same day last week, and then these things are back to 52-week lows again. So again, not an area that I really want to be a part of, even for a bounce trade. Option activity. Slack saw call buying last week as well. It's been kind of it's been repeat, and sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't. But it looked like there was a little bit more positioning towards the end of last week. This was a name that we detailed in the member video over the weekend. We actually had some really good names that we detailed. Amazon was my kind of pick, and Amazon is extending. So, I think this is great. I mean, this was up 2.6% today. I put together a public video. If you didn't get a chance to see that, that's on my Twitter page. But I really like this move in Amazon. Is it getting a little bit extended in the short term? Yes, but again, I think if you look at this weekly chart, I really like when you take a look at this and see that this stock hasn't done much and now is really getting going, which is a great thing right now. Lulu was a trade as well. So just to kind of go over some of the trades that I did today. Microsoft continues to see calls. The Qs sees calls. So I wanted to go over the option activity first, then I'll go over a couple of the trades. But AMD was hot, just kept on going throughout the day. Call buying into strength. IQ. I wanted to go over this chart because a couple of people asked me about it. This does not look bad, this IQ on the daily chart. I think it closed on the highs today. There's a 2627 VPOC up here, which I think is where the stock may be headed. But again, finished on the absolute highs for the day. I know it's kind of tough to go into a China name right now, but the repeat call buying is telling you that there's an appetite there for this name. GME, some momentum calls in this one. I think there was a story out in this one. It's not a name that I really play. Peloton also saw some dip buying. A little bit of Twilio. I already mentioned the Qs calls, some big Qs positioning going on. Interesting because we've been seeing the last couple of days IWM puts repeat on the tape, but I think it's kind of interesting that they're buying puts in one and calls in the other, but just some positioning that people are going on. And really today's option activity, I just wanted to make sure I hammered home the point here. There was, that was pretty aggressive through the first couple hours of the day. There was just a steady amount of call activity on the tape. So that's the summary there. And again, option activity. So what I kind of detailed, happy to kind of go through. This is what I was talking about in the weekend video. Basically just trying to be as objective as possible. I just thought there was too much. I was, like I said, I was a little bit less bullish on Friday. I pointed out some divergences in the market. Hopefully that breadth kind of today kind of straightens itself out a little bit, even though breadth wasn't super strong today because things like banks were down today as well as energy. But I think being as objective as possible in here, and one of the main points that I had was, let the trades come to you. You don't have to necessarily force trades in this situation. If the setup looks great, take it. We detailed a number of those. Restoration Hardware was another one that I didn't mention in the weekend video, but I mentioned it in our chat today. If we go into my commentary page, talked about this one this morning. Just the daily chart. I thought also this kind of looked coiled up a bit. Work was a name that we highlighted over the weekend as well. Let's see if I can find my watch list, but I think a lot did pretty well. And I didn't even put together that. I wasn't seeing a ton of setups this weekend, but I think these obviously did pretty well. Coop bounced today, which I thought was due for a bounce into support. PayPal was a name. I liked the payment processors. I decided to go into Visa today. It just looked like it had the least path of resistance. It got overvalued pretty easily on the 1 hour. Also on the 5 minute was above value for the day, and it's got some runway before we get to the top of value. Which is up at 208. So I think I took two targets on that trade today, and the Amazon trade worked really well. That I traded in the beginning of the day, even though I had some tech issues in the first 15 minutes. I almost lost it because I was trying to get into Amazon on the open, but it ended up working even though I was a little bit late. So I had a call spread on and I bought shares. I bought shares because I could not get an option chain up. So It seemed to work. Mastercard was another name that I highlighted. It just Visa looked a little bit more attractive to me. This finished fine, up 1%. So I still think this has more to run. PayPal was another setup that we talked about. I think PayPal, that was where I saw calls. That was the first thing of the day, and this thing did okay today. Was hot out of the gate, didn't do much, but kind of gave you a little opportunity to go long there. All right, so that's it for today's video. And again, I think for me, had a real nice day trading today. The other thing that I said in the weekend video is, the way that this market has been moving like this, I made a point to kind of talk about how the S&P looks a little bit different in terms of the ranges that it's giving us over the last couple weeks. I think you can say couple weeks now at this point, but much bigger ranges. Like the bars are much have longer width to them, or length, I should say, right? Versus what we were doing here. So it's giving you an opportunity if you're really good at day trading, or if you can do some day trades. And then what I normally do is if the trade worked really well, I take profits along the way, and sometimes I leave the very last piece on, kind of leave that runner on. So that's the difference right now, and that was a point that I stressed in the weekend video, was that take this market for what it is right now. It's giving you some nice ranges. Again, most of the time it's the moves in the after hours market that are greater than the intraday moves, but this is different the last couple weeks. So for now, you're kind of I'm not saying you're getting a free pass, but definitely you're getting a better opportunity right now to day trade a little bit more. So, and that's great because this way I'm not getting overexposed in my short-term account. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Have a great night. See you back tomorrow.